Hello, everyone. Great to be here. So I think the main purpose of this talk is more thinking less from a technical perspective and more from a business perspective, and how companies can use on-chain data to grow their business and to leverage on-chain data to bring insights that are actionable from a business perspective. So just a quick intro of how we started working with Dune and getting to the current stage. It's basically typical wizard route. We started exploring with Dune, forking queries, getting our work public, and then that eventually led us to work with some leading companies in the industry. Now what we do and how we position ourselves is as an on-chain Intel advisory team. So basically, we focus essentially more on the business side and less on the, everything that has an impact from a business perspective. And we advise teams and work recurrently with a number of teams in the industry. So I think the main takeaway and the purpose of this talk is lots of companies basically use data and want to showcase data just to show a shiny metric, just to show or perpetuate a narrative of growth normally. Like the chart is going up, you want to show that. And most of the companies also take decision-making from a narrative perspective. So they go after the current narrative instead of trying to understand, like using the data to understand the trend that is emerging. And so from our perspective is you could use on-chain data as an unfair advantage for your business, like as a way to make decision-making more data-driven and less narrative-driven. So, and to put this a bit more in perspective, this is basically, this diagram is to illustrate like the different levels of how data can be actionable from a business perspective. So at the first level, we have on-chain raw data. That's data produced by the blockchain that eventually you need it to be organized and decoded. We obviously rely on Dune for these two first steps that make it easier for the analysts to analyze data. On the next row, you have contextualized, curated data visualizations. So the analysts or the research search of what charts do you want to look at, what are the important metrics you want to showcase. And then a level after that we don't see that much is having a perspective on the data, analyzing the data, interpreting it, identifying trends, finding blind spots, like finding the story that's behind the data. And on the last level, where we tend to focus the more, is how do you turn these visualizations, this analysis, actionable from a business perspective. So how can you use data to influence your business directly? So I think where you can use on-chain data, and basically the short answer is everything that produces a data point, you can use it. So in every vertical, I think typically where we see protocols using it is to find, like measure addresses, growth, measure activity volumes, and so on. But you can use it in a much more depth sense. You can use it from a marketing perspective, from a risk perspective, for incentives, to track your competitors. So from our side, we tend to focus more on the growth business development side. And that overlaps with the different areas. But to give some examples, from a growth side, maybe you are a protocol, you are on the decision-making of launching on a new L2, and you want to understand what's the right L2 for you to launch next. So you want to track growth, but you want to understand if that growth is organic or not. So what's the best place to launch next? From a marketing and competition side, you may want to measure or to benchmark you against your competition to understand what are your competitors doing and how can you use that in-house. From a marketing perspective, it can be basically something like measuring your audience, understand what they are doing on chain, and find if there's an overlap with a different protocol, and using that overlap to create a business partnership or a marketing partnership with another protocol or company where these overlaps make sense. So also from a product and user behavior side, you may want to understand like retention, churn, what's the user journey, what they are doing on-chain before they're using our product, after they're using our product. From an incentive side, how can you build sustainable incentives that help the growth of your product and that have the end goal that is growing and not just being farmed? So I think that there's like all these verticals where data can be used with a very in-depth way and have a big impact from a business perspective. Now I'll go through some cases and examples of where you could have used on-chain data to make these decisions and to anticipate trends and to basically adjust your business. So I think a first trend that it was very obvious was volumes on NFTs start to decline, and that happened at the same time that addresses start to decline, so everything starts to decline, and business for NFT marketplaces seem to be dying because they depend on volume to create fees. Regardless of the reasons that are behind this, there was other trends that were emerging at the same time. One of the trends was that we start to see more primary transactions on NFTs than secondary transactions. So more mints transactions and less NFT marketplaces sales. And this was a consequence of new EVMs emerging with lower transaction costs. Another trend that emerged was we saw a shift from high-value mints to low-value free mints with a limitless supply or a very high supply. So also something that started to happening since more chains with lower transaction fees started launching. So how could an NFT marketplace adjust in this scenario? One first and the obvious one is you can prioritize primary market as a part of your product. A second one, and that some marketplaces did, was exploring non-EVM markets. Bitcoin and Solana saw big surges of volume, and you could pivot to that. Another approach would be implementing a multi-chain strategy. So every new chain that is launching, you as a marketplace, you can go after every chain and try to understand or have a first-mover advantage from a market perspective. And then in the end, some will emerge as more priority than others, and you can have this approach from a growth perspective. And as another approach that you could have is starting thinking of new fee models. So going from a percentual or a variable fee where you take a cut of every sale, that was the typical fee for NFT marketplaces, so a percentage of the sale, you go for a fixed fee per transaction. Since you have much more transactions, and you can charge a very small fee. All of these examples ended up being used by most of, or by some of NFT marketplaces, and the ones that did this adapted and found growth and had a more sustainable business from what was the primary business before that was clearly in a downtrend. Another example that the industry typically uses is, we see this chart where active addresses are exploding, and this is a sign of growth and a sign that everything is going right and this protocol is having success. And especially now with the new EVMs, that's typically a wrong assumption. So I'll go through a case here that is Uniswap on base that saw a huge growth in terms of addresses, active addresses, like close to 1 million daily active addresses. And if we compare this like in the right side, we can see the market share that they had in terms of active addresses, and they were close to 90% of all addresses trading on DEXs. But at the same time, if you compare to the volumes market share, we can see that Uniswap doesn't have dominance, although they have dominance in terms of addresses. So this shows some mixed signals that are not typically right, and at the same time, Uniswap also has dominance normally in the markets they are. So clearly something is not right here. So if we categorize the addresses according to the transactions that they did, you can see like very well, but the more dark it is in the chart, the more value has a transaction, and the lighter, the less value. And in case of Uniswap, close to 90% of the addresses were doing transactions below 10 USD. And in the right side, you can see like the benchmark from Aerodrome and how those specifically, value had a big growth on Uniswap. So what happens if we filter out all the transactions that are below 10 USD? We get a different chart that tells a story that is a bit more in line with what would be active addresses trading. And just to contextualize, we've gone a bit deeper on this, and this also happens in chains, such as in Solana, we see the same thing, and this is basically a consequence of chains or DEXs where new tokens are being launched at scale. So basically what happens is people that are launching tokens, they are also launching addresses to buy their tokens in a very small amount, basically to get the total number of token holders hired for people to buy these new tokens. So this is also a side effect of the success in launching new tokens that Uniswap has, or Solana happens the same thing. So what's the conclusion here? First is that unique addresses alone is a very shallow metric. Unique addresses are not equal to users. But we don't believe that it's a metric that you shouldn't look at. It's more a metric that you should filter according to what's the need or what's the benefit for your protocol. So one approach would be you can qualify the addresses based on the frequency that they trade. For example, for a DEX, if they are trading every minute, every 10 minutes, it's likely a bot. If they are sparse trading, it's less likely that it's a bot. You can filter out low-value transactions to understand if they are inflating a lot of the metrics. You can overlap on-chain social graphs data mixed with or on-chain social graphs data that is qualified, that you qualify according to their protocol usage, and mix that with your protocol to understand if it's more a human type of usage. I think in the end is you need to filter the addresses that are using to your own use case, and especially if they create value for the protocol. So for example, for a DEX, an important metric may be high volume addresses and not the low volume ones. And now, as a third example, that is very typically an assumption that all activity happens on the front end of the protocol. But in fact, you can build incentives that allow to have activity on other front ends, and you can track the protocols that already have these incentives aligned and basically use that to understand where's the distribution coming from, where can you get traction, and where can you get insights from other protocols. So an example of this is Zora. They have a protocol reward system where they split their fee, and part of the fee goes to the mint, to the entity that refers the mint. We can see here in the chart below, now more than, I think, close than 60% of the mints are being referred, being by users or by other platforms. So most of their, it's an assumption that you can do, is that most of Zora traffic is not coming directly from Zora, but from people that are, or companies that are referring the activity. So if we map this, the Mint referral fees, and use this as a way, we can use this as a way to track trends in the protocol and understand what's the driving traction, what are the emerging trends. So basically we did this in Zora, and we can see like different trends that happened here. First one was Base. When Base launched on Zora, they had a big impact. They were the entity that were referring most of the mints that were referred to Zora. Second was MintFun. MintFun, at a certain moment in time, as an NFT aggregator, they were referring close to 70% of referred mints to Zora. And they eventually were acquired by Zora. Another trend was incentives. Layer 3 and Boost started being used on NFT marketplaces to produce campaigns, to get on-chain virality, to increase discoverability of NFTs. And this trend is also very clear here. And the last one is ArtRun. That's basically a front end that was built on top of Zora that allows to trade a mix between meme coins and NFTs. And the day it launched, it had close to 45% of all mints on Zora were from ArtRun. So how is this information useful? I think the first is not assuming that all activity comes from the main front end of the protocol. And then is how can you build an incentive systems that allows to have other front ends. So basically that, in this case, is similar to what Zora did with the protocol rewards. You create a distribution system where you can have referrals coming from anyone that wants to grab that incentive, being from people that are building on top of your protocol, but can also be a wallet, can also be an alternative front end, can be basically, and can also be KOLs, can be anything. Another way is if you are a competitor, or if you are, let's say, in the NFT space or in the consumer space, you may want to understand what other protocols are using as distribution channels, and use that data for your business. So in this case, you could, let's say, for example, it's very clear Base had a huge impact. You may want to partner with chains that are launching that have a huge distribution to find some traction channel in the same space. Let's say if a wallet emerges as a distribution channel, maybe you want to look at wallets as a front end for your mints, and so on. In the end, we will see more and more distribution channels emerging, and also on top of that, like automated activity, so bot activity, and also not necessarily bot, but automated activity on chain that you want to understand so that you can bring that traction to your protocol. So this ends the talk, but I think for me the main takeaway is if you have a protocol, use on-chain data to leverage your business. Don't overlook how you can use this data, your own data, your competitors' data. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Manuel. I feel like I'm learning new things every single day. So now we're opening up the floor for questions. Anybody wants to ask questions about how to turn these insights into alpha, such as knowing the acquisition is about to happen? Yes.
Hey, I'm Dan. Can you hear me?
No, I think maybe. Test again. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Dan. I'm curious, like, stuff that's not necessarily, let's say you want to track mobile usage, or like someone's using your SDK, but you don't actually have that data in the smart contracts. Do you, I mean, now that like the L2 costs are cheap, do you recommend, with like Google Analytics, you could put like a UTM source, or you could put all this other stuff in there. I thought maybe, what do you think of like just adding additional information to an event that's not really used, but just used for tracking? Have you seen people doing that?
I think, well, normally to track that kind of, even wallet activities is hard. And normally you use a proxy, like you track the fee address where the fee is being generated of the wallet to track if a wallet has activity or not, or is driving activity. And I don't think that's being used in, like, I don't think companies are putting that data on chain. But I think something like that is very useful, especially if you want to showcase your success and how you are driving traffic and distribution. I think if companies can emit like some kind of event, or even having some approach where they can showcase how they're driving growth, I think it's important.
Awesome. Do we have more questions? Launching data, turning alpha, historical things that we've analyzed, making sure we don't have farmers and bots. Oh, we'll go. Sorry, did not realize we go.
Well, what are the teams you usually work with internally? Is it more like finance, BD, or is it like the internal data science teams? Is it the protocol developers who?
No, it's normally leadership teams or growth BD teams. But normally, yeah, I think leadership values more data than anyone else, and normally have the broader perspective of the market and the protocol. And we don't work much with internal data science teams, even if the protocols still have their own. But normally they're more internal focused and less like market focused.
Nice. I think I saw someone.
Hi. Hey, thank you for your talk. It was great. I just want to ask a question actually on the NFT slides. You were showing increased levels of primary market versus secondary market. Well, can you explain what's a primary market for NFT?
So primary market is NFT minting. Secondary market is trades. So not a mint, if it's a trade, typically an NFT marketplace.
Okay, so activity. It's creation of new NFT pretty much.
The primary is creation, the secondary is trading.
Okay, so you're saying now pretty much NFT are just being minted and then just die without ever being traded?
Yeah, I think that's also something that happened a lot, is NFTs have a shorter life cycle. And basically minting experience shifted from a collectible perspective and more like an experience, like something that you use to mark a moment, but not necessarily that you expect it to have value after. But for example, Zora, they launched a secondary market that converts the NFT in an ERC20, and you can trade it as a token, as a way to create a new secondary market, since the typical one that you had in the last cycle shifted completely.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Hi, great talk, by the way. Quick question along the lines of attribution. Have you worked with customers that are thinking about measuring LTV from the classic Web 2.0 view?
Yeah, I think, yes, basically yes, but it's not easy to measure from an on-chain perspective. Even retention and typical Web 2 metrics that you use, even churn, it's not really useful unless you filter out some of the activity itself. But yes, we've seen that. And I think we'll see more and more using these metrics, because in the end, if you want, you need to understand retention, you need to understand churn, you need to understand how much value each user is creating for the protocol. So yeah.
Love it. Lots of questions.
Yeah, great talks. Yeah, I just wondering, based on your experience, like what's the most underrated, like effective growth strategy? Is it about incentives, grant, or maybe airdrop?
Incentives or?
Incentives or maybe grants. What's the most effective growth strategy?
Well, I think the most effective growth strategy is you create like the built-in incentive system works as it is. That's the ideal scenario. I think, for example, incentives are great if you can create a sustainable flywheel where the incentives work and they are not just farmed. But I think like first degree is you built in all the incentives on your protocol so that people will work regardless of incentives. I think incentives is a growth strategy, but if you have that, you are in the ideal scenario. I think like more and more, I think we'll see using partnerships and other distribution channels, and like this example of referring activity from one side to another. I think it's an effective way, but it's still very hard. Zori is a good example, but it's still very hard to see like a scale way where this is being used. But I think that's also a good system, and you basically it's built in on the protocol itself. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Manuel. Less vibes and more insights, but still, we need to have vibes too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.